Welcome to Lead Wisely by WonderTour. In today's episode, we are having part two of our discussion of the movie Ford versus Ferrari. So let's start with a tough question about leadership, as usual. Drew, if you're on a team or an organization that is trying to make a transformation or do something innovative, do you need a radical innovator on the team?
Yeah, that's good, Brian. This is a question that I get a lot working in transformation. What do you do if you don't have an innovator? Do I need somebody who's a radical out working on the edges? In this example, like a Carroll and a Ken Miles type who is constantly like shoving at the edges of the boundaries, like we have to go forward. And I think the answer is that if you're hoping to achieve transformation, yes, you will need some type of person like that. It will be very, very hard to go from current state number one, where we have a model and everything has governance and processes and all this stuff to upkeep it and sustain it, to a new model where we will take some of the things that we like from the old system that are going to still work, but they're going to be arranged in a different way, and there's going to be different higher, priorities might change in the new world and stuff like that. It just is really hard to break out of an existing system that is meant to hold itself together. It is designed to be robust, and you need somebody who's going to help deconstruct it and reconstruct it into what the future state is going to be. So to start off with, and this might be tough for some people to accept, I do think, yes, you probably need a radical innovator. Now, the real question then becomes, how do you get a radical innovator if you don't have one? Because I have a transformation. That's my goal. That's what I want to do with my business. But I don't currently feel like I have one of those radical innovators inside of my organization.
Right. Well, and so I will suggest that I totally agree with you. Like you're going to need somebody that is passionate about change, that is passionate about whatever the new thing is that you're pursuing. You're going to need somebody that's completely on board with that to really thrive. Chances are, depends on how big your team is, but there's a good chance that you have somebody that might be suitable for that role on your team and you just don't know it. Right? How would you identify them? How do you find out if you have a radical innovator on your team or if you have a challenge in mind? Maybe you're not as open minded as Henry Ford and you're not like, give me any idea. Maybe you've already decided on the challenge. We're going to do a Gen AI project. We're going to go investigate, we're going to stand up a business dashboard. I don't know, whatever thing is that you want. We're going to investigate a whole new line of business. We have a new kind of product that we want to make. How would you go about sensing whether or not you've got somebody that is suitable for that job?
So there's a couple techniques that I generally use to do that. The first, if we're talking about just sensing someone, obviously you look for the challenger archetype. You're looking for somebody who is pushing back against things in a productive way. Honestly, you might have to settle for somebody like Ken Miles, who's pushing back against things in a slightly less productive or sometimes unproductive way. And you
Right.
might have to have some kind of a liaison, a magnanimous leader who can help facilitate the discussions with that person. But you're looking for somebody who is like the Han Solo archetype, right? That's always pushing the boundaries and challenging, like, why can't we do things differently? That person, the person who's complaining the loudest, but actually doing something about it, is the key. You don't want just the person who complains the loudest. That's the person that isn't going to help you. But the person who's complaining and then is over here like using duct tape and cardboard and whatever they can find to try to make a solution for this, those are the type of people that it's scary to give them more influence in the organization and more power for a lot of people, especially when you're used to a certain way and things have always been this way and everything adheres to a process and a standard. But this person doesn't necessarily operate that way because they know that really, like, the number one rule of business is know when to go outside of the current rules and policies.
Right. And so I think this is a really important point, right? Is that you're looking for people that are at least a couple of steps down this road already. They already see, if we talk about our model for limit breaks that we developed in some of our previous episodes, right? This idea of you have to start with, I'm dissatisfied with the current state and I've got a new mission. And you have to go through I've got some realization of how to take those steps and aligning that with the organization before you can get to the breakthrough parts. Look for people that are some ways partway down that process already, that are already dissatisfied, that are already trying to get aligned, that are already trying to realize like what it's going to take to succeed. People that are passionate about it, or people that are do it for a hobby, or people that are in this movie, right? People that are associated with your organization, but maybe not part of it, but look like really good candidates, right? So Ford Motor Company is looking for somebody to run a race team. They're like, well, we don't really have a in-house Le Mans winning race team, but we have this guy Carroll Shelby who's got a small business that buys engines from us and has previously won Le Mans. So like, all right, great. He's partway down the road in a couple different ways. He's already associated with Ford and he's already good at the thing that we want. So let's talk to him. You talk to him and Carroll Shelby says, oh yeah, sure, that'd be great, but I can't drive the car anymore and I'm not in this, I'm not at this level anymore. But I know a person that I used to work with named Ken Miles, and he is an incredible mechanic at making cars better, and he's really, really fast driver who's 100% committed to winning races. Like, those are things we need. He's a couple steps down the path. So look for those people in your orbit who are potential innovators, who are maybe already just kind of doing it for fun or already just kind of can't help themselves, that are trying to take those steps, and see if there's a way to empower them to take those steps with more resources as part of the organization, as part of a bigger team. I think that's definitely a potential, right? If you don't have the person that's just like walked into your office and said, we should go win Le Mans and I have experience and I personally will do it for you and this is exactly the plan and here's what you need, sign on the line. It's very unlikely that you're going to get that in your business innovation challenge.
Yeah, and I would add that, okay, let's say you've done that and you can't figure it out. You're like, well, I don't know if I have it. I can't get through to middle management or whoever is there to actually find the person that I need who's this challenger. Then even the first step in the journey is to just do something basically that tries to draw those type of people out into the organization, retain them in the organization, which is like leading with a vision and empowering the team. So like the next best thing you can do if you can't find that person is to try to create an organization that feels empowered, where people feel that it's okay to bring new ideas to Henry Ford and say, hey, we should try this. We should go build this racing team. Hey, yeah, I'll in Carroll's situation, I'll do it for you, but I'm not doing it your way. That's the type of thing you want to hear out of these type of people, because they already know you don't know the answer to this, and they necessarily don't know exactly the answer, but they're willing to iterate their way through to a solution, and they're going to start to believe in you if you are iterating along with them and you're starting to say, okay, well, we don't need 100% of a plan of how to win Le Mans today, but let's at least start investing into Shelby and the racing team and get something started. Let's at least start investing into some new business plan projects or whatever that are going to try to do this transformation. Even if we fail, we'll at least learn something, and perhaps we'll draw out the types of people that are going to actually be able to succeed.
All right, so it sounds like we're starting to get a team in place. That seems like a good place to introduce episode 106 of WonderTour. I'm Brian Nutwell.
I'm Drew Paroz.
And we're on a journey to become better leaders by touring these fantastic worlds and inspiring the Lord by going on a WonderTour.
We connect leadership concepts to story context because it sticks to our brains better. You can find out more at WonderTourPodcast.com.
Yes, you can. And so that's what we're doing here today. We've got Ford versus Ferrari. We've got a movie about a large organization trying to figure out how to empower a small piece of the organization to do a thing that is very different than what they do for a living. So in our last episode, we talked a lot about what that looks like from top down. If you're Henry Ford, how do you find a Carroll Shelby and how do you support them properly? And he does it eventually well, but initially poorly, right? Now we're looking at from the bottom up. Okay, great. You're Carroll Shelby. You've been empowered to do something radical, but you need to find the team to do it, and you need to make it actually happen. You've got a crazy goal. You've got, if you're lucky, you have a blank check from Ford Motor Company. Most of us don't, right? But maybe you've got a couple of people who are skilled but difficult to manage. So now we have to develop this high-performing team that does something radical. And that's going to involve doing things that you don't know how to do, right? So what does that look like? What are some techniques you can use to try to start pulling that team together, or start even figuring out like which, we started talking about surfacing the people that you want on the team. What's different about that than a sustaining model of operations?
Well, and I think truly if we move towards business agility, we're trying to create a model that can do both of these things. And we're still in like the emergent stages of that, I would say, in the world, trying to build a better model that can actually handle both innovation and sustainment of the current operations, that can handle development and operations, if you will.
Hmm.
But I wouldn't say that
We should
has
coin a
been
phrase about that. We should put those things
yeah.
together and call it like DevOps or something. That'd be great.
You're right. And so DevOps, people are trying to apply everywhere, but that's a different story for a different day. Here, we're just talking about people leadership and how to empower a team and how to build a high performing, radical team. And it starts with giving the team the ability to have some of their own values to me. So if you look at this team that Carroll's building, Ford Motor Company has their values. And they can't stray too far away from those values because then they're not the Ford racing team. But at the same time, if you just give them those values, all they're ever going to do is probably matriculate back to the average of where we're currently at, even if you have high performing individuals. So I think giving those individuals the power to develop their own shared value system on the team, where in this example, like they value quick iteration, they value tactile response, hands-on team working together, quickly learning and iterating and growing. They value you see this with Carroll and with Ken. They value conflict. Yeah, the two guys fight and they're like, "Oh, it's been a couple years since we we had an all out brawl like this. Basically, like you want to fight again." And I'm not saying that in your organization, the norm should be everybody yelling at each other and throwing punches, but that level of conflict for this type of a goal is what they need. They have to like be passionate, and if they're not passionate, they're not going to win the race. So sometimes that passion is going to lead them to battle each other. And as long as that's done in a productive way, where at the end they're both sipping their drink and sitting out there like icing their faces together or whatever, right? Like it takes different forms in different teams, but I think giving the team the ability to do those sort of things, I mean, that's going to be absolutely critical. In addition to the things we talked about in our last episode, like, hey, you need to give the decision making to the level of the information. Don't appoint some business executive to make all the decisions who doesn't know about racing.
Right. So I love there's a moment in here pretty early on when they've kind of talked Ken into being part of this team. So the Ken Miles character is very difficult personality. He's kind of abrasive. He really just wants to drive really fast. He's a brilliant mechanic. He's very sensitive to the vehicles, but he's not very good with people, and he's not very good with obstacles involving process. They talked about being on the team. They bring him out to the airport. They pull the wraps off this brand new car that they just flew over from England, the first prototype of the GT40. And he gets in it and he drives it around for a little while and does a bunch of crazy stuff on the airport. And then he comes back and he gets out. I was like, what do you think? And he recites this long list of like, it's terrible at all these things. This is the aerodynamics are no good, the brakes aren't working, and the engine's okay, the gearing's all wrong, and da da da. Like he's got all this stuff, and like as a leader, if you get that negative feedback from your hotshot employee that you've just empowered, like they say all these bad things about your product and about your direction, like your initial reaction is like, "Oh man, we're doomed," or "You're such a jerk. Why am I even listening to you?" Like this is, And Carroll Shelby's like knows him well enough to just like step back, and he's like, "Okay, anything else?" He's like, "I'm not sure," and he gets back in the car and he goes out again, not misunderstanding, like he's identified all these problems and he's already thinking about the solutions and he's already committed to making it better. He's like, I'm gonna go find more problems so we can fix those too. Like he just gets in the car, like he's in. Like recognizing that reaction you got back from this person was not we are doomed or I hate this, but like now I'm super engaged and I'm starting to identify the problems and I'm starting to write them down and I've got this now we've got a list of things that we can do where we can actually make progress. I've got a baseline and we can go. And that's actually really powerful, right? And that could have been handled as a leadership skill. Carroll could have handled that a lot more poorly, right? He could have left this jerk out of the team in the first place because he's a jerk, where he could have invited him into the team, but then really squashed him when he tried to raise ideas or objections. But instead, he recognizes like, oh, this is the skill set I need. I need somebody that will fix all the problems now, so that the problems don't happen on the racetrack, so that the car keeps getting faster, so that we keep iterating. So talk to me about this iteration. What does this look like in this movie?
Yeah, so I think this kind of is bringing us up to our mountaintop, and this is the key to being able to get past blockers is iteration. So one phrase that I coined recently that still doesn't really make sense, but it makes sense to me is iteration is the currency of learning. So if you're trying to get people who can learn rapidly, learn faster than the competition is learning, then they have to be running tight iteration. And so I think setting an expectation with that team and developing a culture where those quick iterations are happening is the most critical thing you can do. It is not to have the perfect plan. The perfect plan will never survive contact with with the opposing force, right? What is instead the best thing to do is to set an expectation and begin developing a culture of quick iterations. I've seen a lot of this recently as we've gone through. I've gone through a lot of these transformations personally, where it's great. A consultant can come in and tell you, here's all the best practices in the world, and developing a race car in this example or whatever, developing software and developing HR practices, whatever you're doing. But really, those things are great only up until a point, only up until, are we actually iterating? Are we actually
Right.
learning? So let's wind our way up to our mountaintop here and talk about a concrete example in Ford versus Ferrari of those quick iterations and learning. Brian, do you want to talk about this moment for us?
I do, but I want to set it up. I want to put a little bit more concrete around what you just said because I love this. This movie, this analogy, right? Driving a lap around a racetrack is an iteration, right? This is one. We did one cycle of the car did all the things that it was supposed to do. You have a very high level metric, which is lap time, right? The person with a stopwatch on the wall can tell you whether or not the iteration overall went better, like did the car get faster or not. The person with the stopwatch on the wall cannot tell you how the car felt. They cannot tell you how much power it made, how hot the tires got, whether or not it started to oversteer or understeer, like all of this stuff. And so what we see in this moment is Ken Miles, who is very, very deep into the process, right? He's very intuitive about driving cars. He's very skilled at driving cars. He's very skilled as a mechanic. He's driving this car around a couple laps around the racetrack. He's doing his iteration, and he comes back and he says, there's air getting trapped into the hood. There's an aerodynamic problem that's causing us drag, which means we're not going as fast as we want to. And they're not seeing it in the data acquisition system that the Ford guys have brought in, and they're really skeptical. And they argue back and forth a little bit. And again, Carroll Shelby as as our archetype of leader here, he's like, all right, we're going to run the experiment. We're going to trust that your intuition is right, and we're going to what's the cheapest, quickest, dirtiest, stupidest thing we could do to check that. So they get a ball of yarn and they tape a bunch of string all over the car, and he goes and drives around the track again. They're standing there with their binoculars, and they're watching these pieces of string stand straight up at speed where the air is getting pushed out of the hood and getting trapped into the car and causing drag. And even the engineer, they ripped the data act out of the car, but even the engineer that was running the acquisition system is like, oh yeah, look at that, he was right, the aerodynamics are messed up, right? And so they've got a hypothesis. They figure out a really quick and dirty way to go just check the hypothesis. Does this make sense? Oh, this hypothesis does make sense. Well, now we're going to go do a bunch of hardcore engineering, right? We're going to go design a part. We're going to change the layout of something. We're going to change the shape of something. This is not just going to be solved with duct tape. But running that iteration with whatever sensors you can get into it that'll tell you that'll look exactly what you're going on, that's the mountaintop, right? Progress through whatever means is necessary by this quick iteration. Trust your experts, but then find a way to validate what they're saying. And once you think you know what's going on, fix that problem and move on to the next one.
Yep.
That is the soul of innovation with unknown constraints, unknown problems, but a known desired outcome.
And this is what you see oftentimes called like lean startup, right? When you run a lean startup, everything is just fast iterations, the quickest learning cycles that you possibly can get. You want to get feedback from the customer as often as possible. And so the old systems oftentimes end up assuming that they know what the customer needs. If we just get this metric right, it'll just make the customer happy. But assumedly in a transformation, there's unknown information, and we need that information. The more of that information we can get earlier, the better. So running those early iterations, that buys us learnings, that buys us that information. So that example that you just illustrated is perfect. It's just a micro example of how they're applying it in racing. So how can you apply that in your business? How can you empower your teams to apply that level of quick iteration? I think one thing is, if you're a top leader, setting the expectation with the team that what will be rewarded is effort. What will be rewarded is learning, not necessarily documents and plans and all that kind of stuff. No, what I want to know is what works and what doesn't work, what satisfies the customer, what provides value, and how Is it feasible? Can we actually do it? Have we tested? Have we test driven if the model works for this? Have we test driven if this subsystem of the vehicle is going to allow us to achieve our overall goal of a certain lap time or a certain, ability to corner or whatever, right? That progress through iteration really is the key to developing that lean agile enterprise.
And I love, again, I love this example because it gives you the analogy, right? You still tie it back to lap time, right? Like it's great. Like we learned that the car has a drag problem. We went from intuition to sort of validated something great. Now we're going to run another experiment where we're going to change something and see if we can get the aerodynamics better. We didn't learn anything real until the car got faster. If the lap time goes down because you changed the aerodynamics, or because then you learn something, then you made progress. That's the kind of innovation that you're looking for. And so it's not to say that the high level metrics of customer value or sales numbers or website clicks or whatever aren't valuable. They totally are. That's your stopwatch. You need that, but that's not enough insight to decide how to make something better, right? So you need experts, you need intuition, and you need detailed observations of what's happening at the ground, on the track, rubber meeting the road, whatever analogy you like, right? That's what you need. So, like, historical example, right? In the software industry, 20 years ago, the state of the art for delivering software was mailing people a CD. Right? I go to Best Buy and I buy a video game and it's in a box and I stick it into my computer and I have a video game on my computer and I can play it. And if it's got bugs or if they want to release a new module, then I got to go to Best Buy and I got to buy another box with another CD in it, right? There was a limit to how fast you can iterate that product. There's a limit to how fast you can learn from your customers. Fast forward to today now, and you've got online software that is running A/B experiments all the time on features. You've got Amazon.com that's constantly checking to see what you respond better to in terms of how information is presented to, what color buttons you're more likely to click on, which kind of products are better connected to others. Like we're learning from customer behaviors in a much more fine grained, much more iterative, much faster cadence all the time. And those things that used to be a sustainable competitive advantage, like I just shipped the best piece of software, are no longer sustainable. So everybody has to be iterating that fast. But we see that happening every day now, right? The pace of change, the pace of improvements is enabled by the other pace of improvements. And so it's just it's much, much faster.
Well, I mean, you even see it in F1 racing and racing at large, right? Even if you just take the software, like pure digital consumer goods and stuff out of it,
Yeah.
it's true in racing, right? These race teams have to move so much faster now. They're able to catch up to each other. It doesn't take them years to catch up to each other in terms of technology or techniques and stuff like that. It only takes them months.
Yeah, you can take pictures of somebody else's side pod and try to deduce their aerodynamics, but if you don't have their process for testing the nuances and getting into the car very quickly, you can stay ahead, but you're staying ahead with process. You're not staying ahead with anything static. So let's talk about these. What are the lessons from what we see Carroll Shelby doing, trying to run his little team in the context of this giant company. We've already seen, they have finally had to give him enough air cover to be able to get the right car and spend the money on changing the car and push the limits on the rules and put the pure racer behind the wheel. Like, we saw that in our last episode. But what's Carroll doing at a granular level? What do we learn from him about how to run this team?
Yeah, so that was kind of the team of teams level that we talked about there. How do you get your teams, all of your teams, moving in a direction, empowered to make the types of decisions and run quick iterations and stuff? Now, if we were to take it down to like a team level almost here, now you're looking at, okay, we have some different archetypes of leaders that are here, right? We already talked in the first episode about Henry Ford. He's kind of a visionary archetype who just gives wide swath. This is the direction we need to go. Not, I need your help to figure out what we're going to do to get there. You have the Ford execs like Leo Beebe, who's like, he's the upkeeper of the old system. He likes the current position that he is in. Again, there's nothing wrong with being in that type of a spot unless it's hurting other people, unless it's really creating inefficiencies that are leading to bad things for the world, for society, whatever, right? But that's how Leo operates, and that's how you're going to see a large portion of top management, middle management operate, like a Leo Beebe. But then what we really want to focus on as we get to kind of the team level here is Carroll. Carroll is the kind of the lead behind the team of teams. right? So he has different teams of people that are working on different parts of the vehicle and stuff like that. And the way that he operates is he's trying to empower those radical leaders. He's supporting them, he's defending them, he's buying them time, he's staking his entire company on them at times because he believes that the only real way that they're going to make a breakthrough is by having this combination of this highly capable, highly passionate, driven towards the objective that actually can create value. That combination of things, those are the people that we focus on. We put as much energy as possible behind them and then keep everybody else moving around them and then try to give other people a sense of personal purpose inside the large purpose. So you kind of get this relationship between Carroll and Ken where they are good friends obviously, but Carroll is constantly having to try to work Ken two ways. He's trying to make Ken more presentable and make Ken more of a leader. Like, Ken, come on, man. Like, you have to at some point shape up. But then he's also operating as a good leader where he's not shifting the mission. So at the end of Le Mans, what happens? You get this underhanded approach that Leo comes in with, and he doesn't want Ken to actually get the satisfaction of winning. So he's trying to get them to all finish at the same time, which he knows will cause Ken not actually to get the first place prize that he deserves. But so what does Carroll do? Carroll comes in and he's like, Ken, you know what the mission is. The mission is to win the race. I'm telling you that this is the direction. They're relapsing a little bit. They want to do a certain thing, but it's up to you. I'm not changing the mission on you. That's a good leader is not going to change the mission on the last minute on you and make you feel like, why did I even do this in the first place? They're going to empower the team to make the decision. What are you going to do in this situation? You own the results and the consequences, but you get the choice.
Yeah, so the Carroll playbook is like you said, when you're in that position, protecting and guiding the leadership team, you kind of got you're facing both ways, right? So we see him facing upward. He is fiercely protective of the team. Like he will go to bat for them. He will go yell at anybody he needs to yell at. He will lie, cheat, steal. It's a little unethical. But he'll and he presents to Henry Ford. He presents, I am so committed to this, I'll put my own company on the line. Like, I am 100% on board with this mission that we're doing together, right? So that's what he does facing outward. Facing inward, he's very empowering. He's very like, the people with the good ideas, if you have an insight, let's test your insight, let's run the iterations. Like, he picks great people. Who do I know that would be awesome? I'm going to put them in the position, and then we're going to kind of run this very collaborative, very iterative shop. And I will empower people to the best that I can. I will put them in the best positions that I possibly can to succeed. And so maintaining those two mindsets of like, how do you represent the team and protect the team? How do you represent the company's mission down to the team, but still sort of let them do their thing? It's a delicate balancing act, and we see it succeeding and failing in a couple different ways, and we see the recognition that he's putting not only himself at risk, his company and his time and his reputation, but also putting his people, their time and their reputation, and in the context of racing, their actual lives at risk, right? And you're not forcing them into that. You are picking the people that are going to do it anyway. You're getting them so excited about the mission that they're just going off and taking the risks of their own volition, and you're doing your best to protect them.
Well, you're giving them what we always talk about, Brian, which is clarity and competence. Clarity to the
Right.
mission and the purpose of what you're trying to achieve, and competence to be able to handle the information and the iterations, to be able to manage the resources that they're given so that the team can truly be empowered and autonomous without creating misalignment across your organizational goals. And that is the job of somebody who manages and leads a team of teams. They have to have good enough clarity into what you're doing, and then they have to give good enough and help the team develop good enough competence so that they can handle that autonomy that you're going to give them to go forth and iterate and spend money and do things and talk to the customers and not shield them from all of those types of things. We've gone back many times to the David Marquet submarine captain, what is it's called Greatness on a Submarine or whatever, but it's probably the greatest like 8-minute video on leadership you'll ever see. And in part of that video, he talks about how, what we want in the organization is people who can make the types of decisions that the CEO would make. And if they don't make the type of decision the CEO would make, they make a better one. That's what you want.
I think that's a good place to leave it, honestly. I think we've, interrogating this movie, like we said, Ford versus Ferrari, the racing is a great analogy for the challenge of innovation, the challenge of iteration towards success. You can use this lap time mentality and this iteration mentality, but the lessons of you need the radical innovators, the lessons of progress through innovation, the lessons of empowering people to make decisions at the lowest level possible come up in a lot of contexts, but they shine well in this movie, and we see the challenges that Henry Ford has as a top level leader and that Carroll Shelby has as a mid level leader are very instructive. It's very easy to picture ourselves in those kinds of situations and recognize which one you are, right? If you're in charge of a big organization, you have to be the deuce. You can't be Carroll Shelby. You don't have that time. You've got to be over the big stuff, right? But if you're on the radical innovation team, then you've got to walk that balance, and you've got to sort of ruthlessly get to the iterative innovation at the ground level as fast as you can.
Yep, and you got to get buy-in with the team, develop that rapport. We see so many different examples of that, whether it's with Phil, with the guy who like locks the second door on Leo when he's trying to get out, right? It's like the team. That's a perfect example of what we just talked about, right? Like he makes the decision that the CEO would have made, basically.
Right.
He already knows. He doesn't need direction. He just goes
Yep.
and does because he's like, I see what's happening here. I know what our purpose is, and I know that this is going to help us to achieve our purpose. I'm not asking permission. And that's the tricky part. I just want to end on this. The last key takeaway, if you want to talk about empowering the radical innovator, helping them to achieve progress through iteration, making sure that they have the competency to succeed and the clarity to make sure they're going the right direction that's going to provide value and that's going to solve problems versus create problems, then it's going to be uncomfortable. No matter what role you're playing, whether you're playing the Ken Miles role of like this technical innovator, whether you're playing the Carroll role of kind of the team of teams leader, trying to get everybody going in this direction, protecting them, empowering them, or whether you're playing the Henry Ford role of the kind of sponsor of all of this operation, it's going to be uncomfortable. There's going to be days where you just want to beat the crap out of the other out of Ken Miles if you're Carroll or whatever because they're just not cooperating with you. There's going to be days like if you're Henry Ford where you're like, no, maybe we should just go back to the old way and put the business executives in charge again. But you can't go backwards. That's the key. Just recognizing that you have those feelings, that they're legitimate feelings, but that tomorrow I'm going to wake up, hold my head up again, and try it again the new way.
So yes, you need the radical innovators on your team, and if you're not uncomfortable, you're probably not innovating hard enough.
That's right.
Awesome. Love it. I love it. Thanks for that, Drew. Thank you, everyone who has joined us. We really appreciate you watching with us as always. All right, we'll look forward to having you with us next week, where we are going to visit a newly released movie, Oppenheimer. In the meantime, hope you have a great week. Thanks as always. And just remember, as always, character is destiny.